Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. And today I want to discuss The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, its approach to storytelling, and what direction I think the series should take moving forward. So it took me almost one full month, but I can now officially say that I have completed The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And of course, I'm mostly talking about the story to the game and the final ending and the final boss, and how the game and the narrative wraps up. I thought it was fantastic. I think the game is a 10 out of 10. I'm currently going back and forth on which game I think is the better game between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and that is most definitely going to be a future video that I make. Kind of wrapping it in with like a review of Tears of the Kingdom is probably going to be my plan. But of course, a game like Tears of the Kingdom is more than just completing the story. I mean, it's a huge world. You've got Hyrule, you have the sky above, you have the depths below. So much to do and uncover and explore and find, and I've probably done like maybe 60 or 70% of it, so there's still a lot of that game for me to explore and uncover, which I will be very excited to revisit sometime in the future. I'm going to take a break, I'm going through Diablo, I want to try to find time to get to Final Fantasy 16 as well, but I can say, like I was just mentioning, that the game is amazing, and I am not going to spoil any major details of the story in this video, that is not the point. But what I did want to discuss is, like I said in the intro here, how Tears of the Kingdom and also Breath of the Wild approached storytelling in the Zelda franchise and changed up the formula for the better in a lot of ways, or at least in a good way, I should say. But at the same time, in the same breath, I could also say that I kind of miss the more traditional linear format of storytelling that the Zelda games have done in the past. And I honestly kind of think that that's where I at least would prefer the storytelling aspect only to go in future Zelda games. Now, to get to the meat of this topic and this concept that I'm discussing, we have to revisit and really explore how Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom uniquely approached storytelling in the Zelda franchise. And as most of us know who've played one or both of these games, they did so in that non-linear fashion. The idea that they used in these two games is the concept of finding story beats and cutscenes in a variety of ways throughout the game world that you can essentially uncover in whichever order you happen to stumble upon them. In the original game, in Breath of the Wild, they were effectively Link's memories. In Tears of the Kingdom, you're looking for what they call Dragon's Tears, which are also actually kind of memories. If I'm remembering right, I think the menu actually even classified them as memories. And so it's the same general structure and format that they're using in both games. You've got a bunch of cutscenes in the forms of memories, whatever the story context tells you that they are. You find them littered throughout the world. You can find them in any random order, and they are cleverly written and designed so that watching them out of order is totally okay. It doesn't ruin the narrative experience, even if you don't find them in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up through 12 or 13 or whatever the number is. And that is definitely one of the benefits and one of the pluses to how they told these great stories in both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom through this format of random memories scattered throughout the world. There is a straight line of the story that they're telling you, but again, finding them in any order doesn't really break the story. So it's definitely very smart how they put it together, but it is also very, very different from most games that have a story to tell, and it's very different from the prior games where the story is handed to you in a specific order dictated by the game. I don't think any one is better or worse than the other, but I can tell you that I have a personal preference. And even though I love the story format, the non-linear format in these two games specifically, I am a bigger fan probably of the older linear storytelling. Now, from what I've seen online over the past couple of weeks since Tears of the Kingdom is released and since a lot of people have completed the game, is that some folks feel like the story in Tears of the Kingdom is just not that good. And what I would say to that is, again, no spoilers here, and I only completed the game like 5 or 6 days ago, so it's relatively fresh, and I haven't even thought of making my review video or anything yet. But what I can say is, on the whole, from beginning to end, when I can now look back on the story in its entirety, regardless of the order that I discovered the story, it's a great story. It's really excellent for the Zelda franchise. I think it adds a lot of lore. It's a great continuation from what was set up in Breath of the Wild. And I think that when you look at those two games kind of married together, They tell really interesting story narrative beats in that franchise. It adds a lot to the lore of Zelda, and I think it focuses on Link and Zelda and their relationship in a really cool, unique way. And of course, this is not a spoiler, but the way they included Ganon in Tears of the Kingdom, I mostly loved. Could they have done some more things with him? Yes. Maybe his character and his inclusion in the story is the one element I would say suffered from the non-linear format. That's just my personal opinion, but I do feel that way. But setting that part aside, it was a great rendition of Ganondorf, and again, without spoiling, it calls back to prior elements in the Zelda lore and in the Zelda franchise that I thought was so freaking cool, and I wish they explored it even more than they did in this game. But I will say that when I see some folks saying that they don't think that the story is very good in Zelda, I think that, and I'm just kind of reading between the lines here, so I could be getting it wrong, and I'm not trying to speak for anyone out there, but when I read between the lines, and having now completed the game and the story, what I think some people are expressing is an issue with the non-linear format of the story. I think delivering it that way is not always going to work well for every person. And so again, if you complete the game and you imagine experiencing the whole narrative from beginning to end in order, I think the story is pretty freaking fantastic, especially for a Zelda game. But if you get it in weird, different orders, it doesn't feel like... I think that some of the impact of the story, and both games suffered from this in my opinion, the impact of the most important story beats I think can be a little bit lost if you find things in strange orders. In fact, I have a great personal example that I experienced with Tears of the Kingdom. And I don't really think this is going to be a spoiler, and if so, it's going to be so minor. I just want you to know it has to do with the Master Sword, so if you want to skip ahead a couple minutes, maybe do so. I'm not going to really spoil anything in particular. But I will say, the Tears quest, where you collect all of the tears and the memories and whatnot, you can get those in any order in the game, and you can tell... when you play that whole game and you know the story, you're kind of supposed to, or let me say it this way. The game, I think, wants you to get the Master Sword after you've completed all of the that whole quest of getting the tears and getting those memories. That story is best told when you get them all first, and then you go and get the Master Sword. There's a really emotionally powerful impact that happens through that story. However, my experience, and of course I was none the wiser, I didn't know how this was going to play out, I was just playing the game and experiencing it as it organically came to me. I actually got the Master Sword well before completing that Tears quest and getting all of those memories. And I will say that the way you get the Master Sword, which is so epic and cool, I loved that scene. I was a little confused when I got it, but I wasn't really overthinking it. I was like, wow, this is epic. I mean, so the Master Sword is here. This is crazy. And then the scene where you retrieve it is so cool and just epic as heck. And I thought it was amazing. I was a little bit confused narratively, but I was just kind of going with it, and I was happy to get the Master Sword. But of course, much later, I completed the Tears quest. I understood the story that they were telling you that's kind of, I think, narratively meant to lead up to retrieving the Master Sword. And I saw other people express surprise that I had the Master Sword ahead of time. My younger brother said the same thing because some people didn't think it was even possible to do so. And so when I completed the Tears quest, having already had the Master Sword, I was able to look back on that whole experience and say, man, I kind of wish that I got the Master Sword after completing all of these Tears. While at the same time, I'm glad that I got that sword so early because I like having something that doesn't permanently break. And I rely on the Master Sword heavily in both games because yes, it'll lose its charge and have to take some time to recharge, but I prefer to use the Master Sword because it never permanently breaks, and that's just my preference. So for the sake of gameplay, I'm glad that I got the Master Sword so early, but for the sake of the story, the way it was told non-linearly, I feel like I was kind of cheated in a way out of experiencing one of the coolest story elements to the game. And so that of course brings me back to the more linear style of storytelling that the Zelda games have traditionally done, right? And here's the thing, my favorite Zelda game of all time, I bring it up often in these videos, it's The Wind Waker. It's that more traditional linear format kind of game. Now, The Wind Waker, along with games like Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess and whatnot, they essentially have a version of what you could call an open world there are side quests, there are huge maps and worlds and areas to explore in whatever order you want, and you can run into characters and NPCs and mini games and side quests and secrets and hidden things throughout those worlds in whatever order you choose. But the main narrative beats of, dungeons in certain orders, cutscenes and story beats that are given to you, items that are retrieved in specific orders, that's the conceit of those games. You get the big moments in certain orders that is dictated by the game. And some people might prefer the freedom of the newer games, and I understand it, but maybe it's because I'm an old man who grew up on the original Zelda game on the NES, but if I could pick, I would pick the version of the story that is given to me in the order that the game wants it to be achieved. Because using my Master Sword in Tears of the Kingdom as an example, I would have preferred to have seen all of those cutscenes and memories before I got the Master Sword for the sake of the story only. Again, not the gameplay, but for the sake of the story, I would have preferred that. But the game allows you to kind of do things in weird orders, even if it's by complete accident, like in my case. And so, like I was saying, I felt like I was kind of cheated out of something. Whereas in the classic games, like The Wind Waker, like Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess and all of those games, that's not really an option. There are non-linear components and open world elements to those games, but they still make sure you get things in the proper order. And so this is why when I see people complaining about the story of Tears of the Kingdom, I think that the non-linear approach may have accidentally hurt the experience for some people. I'm not trying to speak for anyone. You might feel differently, but I'm just reacting to plenty of comments that people have made out there that they didn't really find the story to be all that good or impactful. And I truly think that the non-linear part might have hurt it for a lot or all of those people. And so that's why I wonder if, for future Zelda games, going back to linear storytelling might benefit them and benefit the franchise. I know, again, personally, speaking for myself, I would like it because it's my preferred way to receive the story, but I also think it might ultimately help the reception to the story in future Zelda games as well. Now, it is important for people not to confuse what I'm saying here, okay? Don't mince my words. Going back to linear storytelling doesn't also mean eliminating the open world feel of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. If you think about it, any smart developer, like Nintendo is a smart developer who knows how to make Zelda games, they can make both a huge open world where there's tons to do and explore at your own pace and find things in the order that you choose to find them in. You can do that, but you can also make sure that just specifically the story beats are given to the player in a certain order. It is possible to do both in the same game. We already know that the Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild open world kind of formula is the future for Zelda for now. Eiji Aonuma recently said that right after Tears of the Kingdom launched. We're going to be playing these open world Zelda games for the foreseeable future. I am personally more than okay with that, but what I would like to see them do is to pluck some elements from the classic linear Zelda games and imbue those into future open world Zelda games. And I absolutely believe you can do both at the same time. And to me, the way to do that is simple. It's what I've already even said here anyway. It's make the world open world and let side quests and NPCs come to you at any random order, but make sure that maybe dungeons have to be done in a certain order. Make sure that story cutscenes and story beats maybe come to you in a certain order. I would like to see the return of weapons that have to be found and retrieved in a certain order to open up other areas and other puzzles and solutions in future portions of the game based on having a certain element, a certain weapon or a certain upgrade, a specific kind of bow, a specific kind of sword, a specific kind of hook shot, or whatever the case may be, like the Lens of Truth, these things that the older games would give you in certain orders that affected how you would play and uncover secrets in the rest of the game. I think they can bring those kinds of things back. Obviously, a companion is one as well. Bring those things back, make some of those things linear, but the rest of the world open world. Totally achievable, and speaking for myself, again, as a Zelda fan, I would prefer if future Zelda games readopted that linear storytelling style. So this is one of those things that I know not everyone is going to agree with, and of course, that's okay. I think that we can all look at Zelda and our fanship of the franchise and say, these are the things I like, these are the things I don't. This is what I liked from Tears of the Kingdom, this is maybe what I didn't like from Tears of the Kingdom. And these are the things I'd like to see them do going forward, right? So that's kind of what I'm doing here with my conversation about this. I like the open world approach to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I am one of those people that loves what they did with these two games. But again, I'd like to see traditional dungeons, and I'd like to see linear storytelling specifically come back in future games. Keep an open world, but give me the story in the order that the game is supposed to give it to me. I don't want to accidentally have a Master Sword quest snafu like I did with Tears of the Kingdom. It did not hurt my overall experience, but it is something I feel like I missed. And when I saw that come to a conclusion, but I already had the Master Sword, I was like, damn, I kind of wish I didn't have the Master Sword already, because it would feel so powerful to now have to go and get it, because I now know what it means that it's located in the place that it's located. If that makes sense. If you've completed the game, you know what I'm talking about. So these are my thoughts. It's up to Nintendo how they choose to approach this going forward. And so I'd like to hear from you guys if you prefer the non-linear storytelling where you find cutscenes in random orders, or like me, would you prefer the more linear storytelling just combined with an open world for future Zelda games? I think Nintendo could go either direction, and it's up to them to show us what their plans are for future Zelda games.